and welcome to our webinar on the new normal, work-life integration. This webinar is brought to you by Parental Choice and 2 to 3 days. My name is Sarah Jane Butler. I am the founder and CEO of Parental Choice, and I'm joined today by my colleague Christiana Powell, who looks after our corporate clients. I'm also joined by our new partner, Juliet Turnbull, who's the founder and CEO of 2 to 3 days. Parental Choice is an organisation that is dedicated to supporting employees through their employers. By supporting an employee's well-being practically and emotionally, it's our goal to improve productivity and retention within businesses and make them a better place to work. Our partners, 2 to 3 days, is a company with a really strong purpose that I completely admire. Its mission is to advance women's equality in the workplace through the power of flexible working. They're growing and nurturing the UK's largest online community of highly capable women who wish to pursue their careers on a flexible basis and enable companies to advertise their flexible roles directly via their platform to the women they want to attract and hire. So that's the introductions done. Let's move on to what we're really going to be talking about today. CP, if you can move the slide on. There you are. Those are our pretty pictures, so you can see who we all are. As I said, I will be moderating this session today. Juliet will be talking work and Christiana will be talking all about family. If you do have any questions while we're going through this, we'll try our best to answer them. But in the meantime, or else we'll have questions at the end. Of course, if you want to contact us after this, you're very welcome to as well. PP, if you could move on to the next one. I think that just covers the stuff we're talking about questions. So over to you, Christiana.
Brilliant, thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christiana Powell. Before I joined Parental Choice, I was the regional vice president for EMEA for a relocation management company. It's a sector of industry where lots of things go wrong, and it's all about finding the solutions. So I'm here today presenting from a very sort of pragmatic and sort of human standpoint. So with that, we will get started. So the slide we have in front of us here has 5 bullets. They may seem to be extremely obvious, but I'm a firm believer that when things are very obvious, quite often we tend not to think enough about them. The situation is unfolding at a very fast rate, and we're already finding, how hard it is on everyone. It's going to be hard in a number of different ways and for a number of different reasons. It's stressful generally, trying to now coordinate and juggle not only your work life, but also your family life, all in the same place. All of the routines that we like to stick to wherever possible are now broken. And the juggling that we had before is just even more than it was. So to begin to accept that it is going to be hard is really important. Once you start accepting that, you're on the way to finding solutions. We are all in this together, and people will react very differently to it. Some people will shut down, some people will become more quiet and perhaps more reserved. Others will become more excited. And it really is a case, again, of understanding, what is going to happen and how we're going to get through this together. Looking after yourself to look after others, again, sometimes I think as a parent, this becomes almost sort of counterintuitive. You want to nurture and look after your family as much as you possibly can. And sometimes it's the detriment of you looking after yourself. For you to really be able to provide the best support and to achieve as much as you possibly can during this time, it really is so important to look after yourself. Things are different now, from schooling to work to having everyone in the home. So I think we need to start thinking differently, thinking more creatively about solutions. They are out there, but they aren't going to be as obvious as perhaps they were before. And all of your priorities probably have shifted too. So this is the time to think differently to create your new normal. Remaining positive really talks to the last point here. The old norm will be back. This isn't going to be forever. Perhaps even the new norm that we have now will be combined with the old norm, and so the future norm will actually be a better place than we came from, and certainly we are in now. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and I seem to spend an awful lot of time telling her that it's not all about her. However, I think in this situation, it really is about you. It's about us as individuals, and I think that if we can look at ourselves as individuals, we can then build back up the sort of the family unit, and actually create something together. A lot of people are doers. I think in this environment, if you're a doer, I think you need to be particularly careful about your own welfare. Ensure that there is a fair share with your partner if you're in that situation. Doers tend to just get on with things. They take far too much on. They normally expect too much of themselves. And ultimately, with the amount of stress and anxiety and change that we're all going through, I think a doer is more likely to be in a position to actually start to resent what they're actually achieving. You're obviously going to be prioritizing your professional and your family workload. We're going to talk a little bit more about that on some slides further through the deck. I am someone who likes to plan. I think it is important to try and have at least a framework to work towards. But I think you also need to ensure that you're prepared to show flexibility to that. If you actually look at any work environment, you know, if you put together a plan, things that don't work, you know, you do review them, you do work out why they haven't worked, and you come up with, you know, the need to either to move things around, to tweak things. And I think, you know, in this environment, we need to be quite sort of pragmatic with regards to the way that we approach things. And so, as I say, to have some form of structure and framework in place is definitely going to be an advantage. We've got to develop new routines to suit work and family life. What we were doing before is not going to work now. The actual requirements, what you're actually being asked to do, you're not just asked to being a parent now, or just being, you know, an employee or a manager. You're now also being a full-time carer potentially. You're also potentially being asked to become a teacher. So it's all about trying to develop those routines around what will work best for everyone. The lines of communication need to be kept open. The last thing that is going to help in your situation is if you also have a communication lockdown. One lockdown is enough for anyone at the moment. So lines of communication on all levels, whether it be within the family, whether it be for work, just with you and your partner, with you and your children, etc. We, for the most part, are all now working from home, and I think, you know, whilst we know that that's what's happening, I think that we also need to be mindful that people will actually understand that. You know, it was great when we started just a minute ago to see some of the little faces pop up, you know, when people were getting their videos online. You know, people understand that we are trying to do the best we can with the resources that we have available, and they are going to be understanding of that. Going back to looking after yourself, again, with so much to do and being pulled in every direction, I think trying to find some quiet time and private time will benefit you enormously. It doesn't have to be for hours, but just a little bit of time away, just to get the opportunity to gather your thoughts and really sort of focus on you, will be beneficial in the long run. When we're at work, there are all sorts of natural breaks. So, you know, when you are dividing up your day and you are looking at the time that you're working, even if it's for a fairly short amount of time and you're determined to get as much as you can done in that time without interruption, don't forget to take a break. You will become more productive after it. And I think most importantly here is, you know, give yourself a break. This is not a time to focus on perfection. It's not a time to be beating yourselves up because you haven't done everything perfectly. It's a time to actually really think about what you have achieved and what you can achieve with the best resources that you have available. So we are all in this together. So if you're in a situation where you have a partner, I think it's really important to obviously now start to build back the unit, if you like, and in terms of how things are going to work. So ideally, if you can sit down the night before and come up with a joint plan Obviously, everyone's work schedules are going to vary. Some days I might have back-to-back conference calls, which means that I'm going to be less available. The next day, perhaps my husband is in the same situation. So even if you have that overall framework, just by having a quick check-in the night before and coming up with a joint plan will alleviate the pressure when you get up the next morning, because you'll know, in theory, that there is a game plan at least. Trying to do some of the mundane family things together is also, I think, important. They still need to get done. Some of us will have been in a situation where there was help within the home, whether it be looking after the children, or someone popping in to do the ironing, all of those things. Anything that still needs doing, I think it's really good if you can actually try and divide it up or try and do it together. There are also the more pleasurable family tasks. It's good to divide those and share them too. Again, I think if you're a doer, you might be focused on doing the things that really need doing, which might be to the detriment of actually enjoying this time. I think that despite the difficulty and the hardship that we're working through, there are lots of positives to look to during this time. The amount of time that you can actually sort of spend at home with your children, etc. So finding that important, pleasurable time is really good too.
So just cutting in here, Christiana, we've had one question from Nadia,
Sure.
who's asked us, how do you plan efficiently without turning the whole weekend into a planning chore for the following week? And as you've said, we should sit down the night before and come up with a joint plan. Do you think it is the case that the plan needs to be revisited every night, or do you think it should be something that is a weekend planning session?
I think that if you have an overall framework that you can sort of upcycle week on week, that's the key. But with regards to moving things around during that plan, I think that it will depend certainly on the type of work you do. As I say, if your role is such that you're not on conference calls at all, you may be able to have a more structured routine. If you're someone that has lots of conference calls and your partner, or you're a lone parent and you're trying to juggle it on your own, you are going to have to potentially either work around those calls or, and I talked to it on the next slide, have the conversation at work to see what can be done to alleviate some of that pressure with regards to making yourself available. And it doesn't mean you're doing less. Perhaps there's an opportunity to do something different within the team, for example. I hope that helps.
Okay. Sorry, I'll let you get back to your rest of the slide.
So avoiding showing frustration and concern in front of the children, it's a given, but again, because it's a given, I am going to mention it, because when there is frustration generally and a huge amount of stress and anxiety, it's the sort of time where things do pop out when they shouldn't. So again, just be really mindful, and if you're taking that time to gather your thoughts, hopefully that situation won't arise. We've touched on the actual sort of planning. As I say, I think it's really important to keep it as a work in progress, and to also review, what did work and what didn't work. I think that also there are an awful lot of resources out there, and even touching base with other people in a similar situation with children the same sort of age or doing the same sort of job. I think the more sort of sharing of ideas that can be done, probably the better for everyone. If you have school-age children, one of the things that we have been looking at is your role. First and foremost, you are a parent. Suddenly you've now become probably a teacher to a certain extent as well. There is a difference between teaching and learning, and there is a difference between being an educational buddy and a teacher. So if you're an educational buddy, you're doing the role of a teacher with regards to ensuring that the learning happens, but you're not actually teaching it as such. So you're actually working alongside your child to find the solutions. So you get that buy-in, which may help to prevent that sort of blur between your role as a parent and an educator. With regards to teaching and learning, I think most children of most ages, are considered to be, a bit of a sponge. So, if the teaching side of things or the educational buddy side of things is not going as well as you think that it should be going, maybe start to focus on what else they can actually learn in a more sort of relaxed environment. So again, just taking whatever you can that's positive out of this. It's not going to be forever. They can always catch up on the more sort of academic things, as long as they're actually learning through this process. And lastly, you probably already have relaxed the boundaries. You're going to need to do that and be mindful that it's just for the short term, perhaps. But you know, things that normally you would not allow, you are going to potentially agree to. If you're a lone parent, I think we have to appreciate that it's going to be even harder. A lot of the overall sort of planning, etc., still applies to you, but you're on your own to a certain extent, as you will know. Looking after you is more important. Any opportunity that you can get to pull other people in, even if it's remotely, and even if it's for very short spaces of time, you know, whether it's, you know, a grandparent reading a bedtime story, you know, you might still have to be there with your child, but if someone else is reading the story, perhaps you can zone out and at least get a bit of space for yourself at the same time. The last 3 points here, I think, are particularly important if you're a lone parent. You probably need to be more lenient on yourself, be more realistic, and be open and honest with work. When I say a lone parent, we're all in a very odd situation. There may be people who are used to being a lone parent. There's also the sort of the new lone parent. So, for example, you know, if you are, if your partner happens to be, you know, a frontline worker, for example, you may suddenly have gone from a family situation where you have lots of support to suddenly actually finding yourself very much doing the lone parenting. So it's worth looking at it from that side as well. But I think really the honesty with work and you know, advising them what you're going through so they can support you is really important.
So on that note, Juliet, could I bring you in here and find out, we've talked very much about sort of dealing with work life from an employee's point of view, but what are your thoughts on communications between employers and employees during this time?
It is absolutely it's absolutely critical. We have to, if we start with the point that 90% of all communication is non-verbal. We are suddenly forced into this situation where we're all working from home. So you've got to overly communicate because you don't have those verbal cues in the same way if you're all sitting in an office together. So there are many things that you can do, from both a structural business side of it to also integrating what I would call the sort of the water cooler moments. So I think it's very important that you start the day by talking to your immediate team on a conference call or on individual calls, and that you set that cadence through the week, that you break up and you have more regulated and structured communication. I also think not only for the lone parents, but for those who are feeling more vulnerable, that you spot those and you make sure you have more one-on-one chats, pick up the phone, have a conference call. But also you've got to remember that, you know, leaving the office and having that impromptu cheeky beer or going for a coffee isn't going to happen. So be creative. You know, people are doing some amazing things. My team and I had a wine o'clock last week, and this week we're having afternoon tea tomorrow. And when we're just stopping and grabbing a cup of coffee and a cake and just having a chat. PwC, I've got a virtual choir going. You've got to find different ways to keep those communications going and make sure your diary's peppered throughout the week.
And how do you think businesses should be looking at this period of work-life integration?
I think it's once you get over the shock, and I think everybody's gone through their oh shock moment, this really is happening. I think it is an amazing way for companies to innovate. I think it's an amazing way for them to pivot and come up with new products and new ideas to integrate with and connect with their clients and their staff. I think it's also the gift that we've all been given, and you hear people talking about it, we've all been given the gift of time. Suddenly, and I think that comes with different challenges, the fact that every day is looking the same. and we can come on to that. But I think we've all been given the gift of time. We've all been given the ability to slow down a little bit. We're no longer racing on the commute, etc. And therefore it gives companies a time to really understand their staff a lot more. My business has only got a small team, but already I have got to know my colleagues a hell of a lot better than I had before COVID-19.
So Christiana, how is old versus new looking?
So old versus new, I think to Juliet's point, you know, that there are a lot of things that we were doing before that we're now not doing. So when you're actually looking at, you know, trying to find that time, it potentially can be a little bit overwhelming. But once you actually start to consider how much work and how much learning actually happened, and you start factoring in and stripping out a number of different things, you realize that there is more time available to you. It's just a case of how you utilize it. So once you start stripping out, you know, the school runs, the commute, the interruptions at work, the disruptions during the class, you know, time, etc., and then the weekends where there's no running around, you're not going to the gym, kids clubs aren't happening, and there aren't any, you know, parties to go to. So there's a lot of time that before was required, which now is available to use in a very different way. So now when you actually look at the new norm, you need to obviously calculate how many hours you need and how might you create time. Now you've got 7 days, not 5. The working days are not 9 till 5. You can have them divided up into a number of different tranches. You can, you know, work around that and divide that over that longer period. There are also things you can do with regards to the way that your family are operating. I was a parent who was very strict on bedtime, but in this environment, you know, when the children haven't got to get up to go to school, is there the opportunity to have them up later, enjoy that family time with them, let them sleep in the morning so you can get some work done? So again, it's thinking creatively. Obviously, perhaps you went to the gym before. You've obviously got PE for the children. I know Joe Wicks is a big favourite with certainly the team that I work with at Parental Choice. But, you know, getting out to do family exercise, you know, is there a way to not only combine, but also break that up? So, for example, one of the things that I was thinking about, you know, if you're a runner and your partner is a runner and you've got to take your kids out for a walk, is there the opportunity for you to go for a walk, for you to go for a run, for your family to go for a walk, you meet up, and then swap over? So almost like a run, walk, run relay with your partner. That way you're only out once, you're all out together, and you've also got time on your own. So again, it's the creativity of thought that's really, I think, going to help. There's been quite a lot about trying to outsource. I think probably in today's environment, there probably is very little that you can outsource by using a virtual PA. But again, think about it. Is there something that you can outsource? Or perhaps more importantly at the moment, are you actually doing something that you don't really need to be doing? You know, your house doesn't have to be spotless. No one but you and your family are going to see it at this point in time. So as long as you, whip around with a Hoover, that might be sufficient. You don't need to wax the floor on top of it. And then the last point really ties into the point that I made on an earlier slide about the sort of the education. You know, children are there to learn anything that's around them, anything that's of interest, anything that they can be involved in. And I'm not suggesting that literally everything you do becomes an educational process, but there are lots of things where you can actually get them involved and be teaching them without them even realizing it.
So I'd like to turn back to Juliet at this point. Given that we're now looking at a very different norm for most of us, how do you think this new situation, what will that mean for businesses and employees once this is all over?
I think, first of all, that the nation will breathe a massive sigh of relief, and there'll be a thank goodness across the whole of the UK, if not the world. And bearing in mind that we've all been, even though I'm a massive advocate of remote working and have worked remotely for 18 years of my life, I have never been under these forced confinement before. No two ways about it. Everybody within government regulations is going to race back to being normal, and there'll be a massive sigh of relief. We'll all be craving social and business interaction. I think there's no two ways about it. But it's a bit like what World War II did for getting women back to work. We have got our own world war going on at the moment with COVID-19, and what we will have proved without doubt is that people are productive working flexibly, and people are productive working from home. Everybody more or less will be set up, be able to work from home, and they will have got into a pattern of it. So I think this is a massive opportunity for the UK and the economy as a whole to move with the modern times. There'll be some people who will work out that they hated working from home every single bit, and it's not for them, and so for some people it never will be. You've got to remember that you've done it under extreme circumstances, but a bit like I said earlier, I think this is a massive opportunity for us to accelerate the pace of change, because we all know that the trajectory is towards flexible working. We all know that it's more towards remote working, but we have been held back by what I call the dinosaur mindset by a lot of companies, and I think that's now been blown out of the water, and it's for those companies who really seize the opportunity and seize the moment to accelerate the pace of change that will really win the race.
Thanks, Julia. I absolutely, completely agree. I think the arguments now against flexible working have all been shown to be fairly flimsy, and I think it's quite clear that we can all work from home quite productively and quite successfully. And I think now when somebody comes up with a business excuse as to why this doesn't work, I think one can very clearly turn around and say, but hang on a minute, what have I just been doing for the last 3 months?
Yeah, and what I always talk about, the world war that we were fighting beforehand was the mindset. It was the mindset of the executive team. It was the mindset of the line manager that said no before they said yes, and they weren't open to doing things differently. And we've all had to prove that when you're faced with a catastrophe, that your mindset has to get with it and you have to innovate. Yeah.
I mean, at Parental Choice, we've all worked flexibly from day one. It's a day one right for absolutely everybody in the team, full stop. But lots of people have said, oh, that's okay for you because you're a small business. But I think large businesses are now finding that their teams and their working parents, etc., can all work very successfully from home. And now there's no real reason why, since tech has set us all up at home, why that can't continue. I'm sure this is a debate that we could, Juliet, you and I are very much in agreement on. But I will move back to Christiana now to talk about how do we get our children involved in this plan of ours, and how do we get them comfortable with this new norm?
Thanks, SJ. So when we look at the sort of the family unit and trying to get this plan off the ground, I think that you should really think about it in the way that you would with any team. You're leading a team. It's just a different sort of team. You need the buy-in, you need to get people involved, and you need to communicate. Obviously, this is on a very different level, hopefully, from your co-workers and the people you work with. But as I say, I think the concept is very much the same. So I think to really have your child involved in the plan, to get that buy-in, and how can you do that? Well, I think there are a number of different ways. I mean, like any project, you know what the different components are. You know that people are going to have to do them. You know, can you just mix it up a little bit? Can the child decide that, you know, they want to do something they really enjoy doing at this time, and then something that really they have to do at a different time? You know, mix it up, but get their involvement and let them be part of that overall plan.
Can I add something there, Christiana? I think there's also, some people work better with a more overt and rigid plan. If I just share a personal story, I was like, right, we need a plan. So my children are 13 and 15, and we sat down when they came back from school about 10 days ago and said, right, we need to have a plan and we need to share everything. And they went, no way, we're not having a plan, no way. And the first thing my children did was they dyed their hair blue and red because they could, and school, and I couldn't stop them. And then what I realized is that we did need a plan, but it was very much a behind the scenes plan. So I make sure that the cadence of the home, and my husband and I make sure the cadence of our own businesses work, and we do check in every day, like you said, behind the scenes in the evening and what's coming up, and I also check in with my team. But when I'm dealing with my children, it's very much a hidden plan that we just weave into every day, which is maybe something, just top tip I wanted to share, because not everybody needs something written on the fridge.
No, and I think it is very much sort of age dependent, and I think certainly to your point, you know, when you get to the older age, you know, a bit of reverse psychology is always good.
And I'd like, at this point, I'd like to bring in a question that Arantxa Del Rio has made. So how do you work while schooling kids age 8? I have an 8-year-old, Arantxa, so I hear you loud and clear. I think slightly differently to dealing with teenagers. When you do have younger children, and I know Valentina has asked, you know, what do you do with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old? I think in a way, I think for parents who have younger children, I think this is harder, because clearly the length of concentration that younger children have is much shorter, and similarly their ability to just hide away on their phones or tablets is equally much shorter. So I think with us, what we tried to do is give our children a timetable. So our 8-year-old and I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. They both have a timetable, just as they would have at school. We've tried to stick as closely as possible to the timetabling session. They are being given activities by school, English and maths. I use that time while they are silently learning to work. So I'm there in the room with them. They can ask me questions, but I use that time to sort of answer emails. I think with younger children, Valentina, it is harder. And there's only really so much Peppa Pig and Captain Underpants that you can really watch in a space of time with your children before going slightly doolally. I think the more activities that you could possibly have, from playing, you know, from making baking, or from painting, or from literally just letting them make a mess. I mean, as Christiana said, no one's going to see your house for another 2-3 months at this rate. So I think the ability to kind of spend some quality time with them at the beginning of the day, and being with them at the beginning, and then moving on to more quiet situations and quiet activities for them to do later on is how I would engage the younger children. Back to you, Christiana.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sarah Jane. And we've already touched on, you know, the actual sort of the ability of children to concentrate, which again is going to be very age specific and also dependent on the child. So make sure that when you're actually planning things and dividing up your day, that those slots are manageable for the individual you know, child in your house. The use of do not disturb signs, I did actually see quite a good one, which obviously was for slightly older children, which basically said, I'm on a conference call from 9 to 11, but in answer to your question, the answers are probably below. I don't know, it's in your bedroom, I don't know what's for dinner, etc. So if the child is slightly older, perhaps you can, you know, make it a bit more amusing so that you get the buy-in there, but they leave you alone to concentrate on what you're doing. But for younger children, you know, again, if you get them involved, get them to choose what sort of do not disturb sign they would like, you know, stop and go, red and green, thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe have a mixture of all of them, and they can decide in the morning, you know, which ones they want to see, you know, stuck on your door during the day. Again, depending on the child or the children, showing a visual with regards to what the day actually looks like is something that a lot of people have worked with. There are some really good resources, and again, this is obviously for younger children, but very good resources on SEN sites. So you might want to sort of tap into that. Everyone, doesn't matter how old you are, you know, want something to look forward to, so make sure you build that in. And I think the other thing, again, you know, there are going to be so many things, people are going to come up with some fantastic ideas, over the next couple of months. So do keep your eyes open for other things that that you can incorporate into your timetable or into your day to help your kids stay occupied and really sort of embrace the situation. And here are just a few more other ideas. I think certainly with regards to creating something like a boredom box, to Sarah Jane's point, if they can make a den in the sitting room, it doesn't matter, no one's going to see it. If you have a big box full of craft stuff and they can just pull it out and get on with it, again, great. I think that most people would rather think that they've decided to do something than be told it. So again, if they can actually discover things to do rather than being told to do it, you might actually find that that they will do it for longer. Just leaving things around. So for example, if you leave an encyclopedia on the sofa, if your child's of the right age, they might actually pick it up and flick through it, as opposed to spend another half an hour chatting to their friends. It's really providing the opportunity for, I think, children to find a way to not only entertain themselves, but also to learn as they go along. So I think to Juliet's point, it is about structure, but it's certainly not all about structure. It's about that flexibility and the creativity to make sure that you're putting everything you can at their disposal. So one of the last things we wanted to touch on was really talking about the situation. I think you have to ensure, obviously, that what you're going to say to your children is age appropriate and is also tailored to the way that your child is. Finding the right time to talk is about finding the right time for you as well as your child. You need to ensure, obviously, that you're in the right frame of mind, and you need to be sure that you have access to the subject matter. You may know a huge amount about it, but make sure that you've processed it and have it in an available format so that you can communicate that to your children. There are some fantastic resources out there, and we've got a link that we can share after this if anyone's interested, particularly for the younger children. There's a very good sort of workbook, which is a storybook as well. It's important to find out what your children already know. I think we're far enough down the line now that there's an awful lot of information that they will have picked up. Some of it will be correct, some of it will be incorrect. So before you actually start trying to really broach the subject, find out what's already out there and what they already know about. Obviously, keeping positive is extremely important and allaying any fears. And I think being able to empathize with worries and concerns is also really important. You may not know the answer to one of the questions they have, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You need to be able to explain to them that that's a really good point. Let's have a look at it together. Let's see what we can find out, or I'll go off and have a look, and then maybe we can chat about it. I think it's also really important to be sure that this isn't a one-off conversation. I think when something is quite difficult to understand and is something that perhaps is concerning, the initial questions that a child has will not be the ones that they might have in 3 days or 4 days. Things will come up. So I think it goes back to Juliet's point generally about communication and making sure that you're there to listen and also to inform. And then lastly, obviously, talk about, what they can do to ensure that they're doing everything that they can, not only to be safe themselves, but also to keep other people safe. So, sort of the good hygiene and talking through, obviously, all of those different aspects with regards to safeguarding.
Okay, so I think I hope that we have brought to you lots of different ideas about how to integrate your work and your life. It is a new period of time for all of us. It's going to take some time to get ourselves accustomed to all of this. But I think the aim is to let yourself be flexible, be lenient with yourself. Don't be too tough on yourself. Nobody is finding this easy. If anybody is finding this easy, please do let me know. I could sure as hell find out how. But we understand the situation. I have a partner who varies from time to time, from being incredibly helpful to being incredibly unhelpful. So I'm sure we've all got partners like that if we have partners. I think it's trying to just keep calm, trying to find 5-10 minutes in your day where you can take a big deep breath, go for a walk if you can, do some yoga, or simply just disappear to your bedroom and hide under your bed covers. No one's going to blame you for it. This is a new period of time. It is difficult for us. We are all social creatures. We're used to talking to our friends, as are our children. So let them have their Zoom, let them have their WhatsApp calls, try and get their friends to phone them, get their grannies and grandpas to phone them. You know, they need socializing as well, even if it's just on the phone. But let me hand over to you guys now. What questions do you have? Oops.
Whilst they're coming in, I would just add from a business perspective that, and we've talked a lot about this in the work we've been doing with our partners, is you've got to build the golden thread of trust, I call it. You've got to be an authentic leader. You haven't got all the answers. Every day throws a new curveball, and I think you've got to trust people to get on and do their work when they can, whether that is 6 o'clock in the morning or at midnight. You need to be able to call it and say, I'm going for a walk now, or I'm playing Play-Doh with my children, or I'll get you that report done, but I won't do it until after supper tonight. The more authentic and open you are, the more you'll encourage your team to behave that way too. And we're all vulnerable. So one of our greatest strengths is to show our vulnerability. And if you're having a wobble, be able to call us and say, I'm struggling with this. Can somebody help? And it's amazing who steps forward to help. That would be my.
Yeah. So thanks, Juliet. One of the questions that we've had come in, and I'm going to direct this to you, Juliet, is from Juliet Turnbull asking, do you think employers are expecting employees to be able to work full-time hours whilst juggling childcare?
No, I don't think. They would be a really irresponsible employer if they were expecting that. And I think that's when you have to be able to call it. And it comes down to open communication and being able to say to your employer, if they want you to do X, Y, and Z, you can say, well, I can do X, Y, and Z by, you know, ordinarily I might get it done in a day or a week. You might be able to extend the time frame, or I can do X now and I'll get to Y tomorrow and I'll do Z on Saturday. It comes back from what we were talking earlier about having really open and clear and transparent communication between your employers. If they really are being that foul to you and expecting everything done, then they are not a progressive employer, and companies are still hiring. Companies are still advertising on our sites, and you can still do an interview over Skype. Otherwise, but you know, hoping that's not the case, then it comes down to open communication.
So question for you, Christiana. Marie-Charlotte has said her husband has been furloughed whilst she's working from home. How can she manage the fact that he ends up taking care of their toddler most of the time, knowing that it is challenging for him? How can I support him?
I think still share it. So, you know, maybe whilst you're working, you know, he's doing the childcare, but ultimately as soon as you have the opportunity, or you can step away from your desk, you know, maybe give him a break. It's all about, you know, you are in this together. And I think, you know, quite rightly, you know, you're obviously concerned with regards to making sure that it's fair. You know, he is also now presumably in a very difficult situation. I think probably, you know, mentally, you know, something like that is also difficult to deal with. So, you know, he probably has his own emotions exactly, you know, at the same time as now he's obviously looking after, you know, the little one. So again, I think it's about, you know, talking about it and dividing it up, you know, that there will be opportunities for you to be able to help and support him in the same way as that, you know, he's obviously doing a fantastic job, you know, looking after the little ones.
So Julia's come back and said that she's effectively the employer, but she's trying her best to understand that how to explain to her team that they are there to support them while also delivering to clients. As a lawyer, Julia, I've worked in law firms, and I know very much how it feels. In fact, I still am juggling my clients alongside my legal clients, alongside my work and my childcare positions. I think clients will understand if you say to them at this point in time, we are doing our best to get this work done for you, but please bear in mind, you know, these are different times. Your clients will have children too. Your clients will have their own struggles internally, their own new work-life integration that they have to manage. Open communication, I think, at all times is really important. Frankly, it's better to get a job done properly and then rush it. And I think what happens if clients are demanding and saying, we need to have this immediately, you have to tell them that actually the reality is it's better to get a job done well than try and rush it and for them not to be happy with it in the end. I'm not sure, Juliet, if you agree with that.
Absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree more. It comes down to open communication and setting realistic expectations, and also to give yourselves permission that even if you have set an expectation to a client or a colleague or your boss that you're going to get a piece of work done by a certain time, stuff happens. Your children have a meltdown, they have a complete strop, they don't sleep or whatever, and life still gets in the way. But I think the wonderful gift that COVID-19 has given us all is the ability to say, I'm sorry, but I can't get it done by now, but I'll get it done to you by this time. So I think most things can be overcome by just keep a very open communication going with all concerned.
So we've come to the end of this webinar. I hope people have all found it very useful. If anybody does have any further queries, please do feel free to direct them either to Juliet at 2to3days or to me or Christiana at Parental Choice. Do please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. We've got lots more webinars coming up to help you. If you do have any queries on the childcare side or elder care side and you need support with your childcare or elder care, please do contact us at Parental Choice. Similarly, as Juliet said, people are still hiring. So if you think this has given you time to think and it's time for a change and you'd like to work with the progressive clients that Juliet is working with, please do contact her. I 100% recommend her services. But if in the meantime, I hope you've all found that very helpful, and it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, everyone.
All the
Thanks,
best.
Ben.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.